Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoteric Entertaining series on the MiSTer FPGA DE10 Nano project, more specifically in this instance, the work-in-progress Philips CDI core from Slamy. Just a few days ago, he did a big cumulative update, fixing a lot of the bugs in the overall core, giving us more games that work, better performance, just overall a better experience on CDI. Now do be aware this is not a completed core, and the digital video cassette, that add-on, is still not implemented into the actual core, so those games that require that are still not going to be working, but let's jump right in and take a look. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. If you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, I got a Patreon link down below as well. Now I would say Burn Cycle definitely is the best game on the Philips CDI, and now it is definitely playable and you can start to enjoy it. It's basically a full motion video adventure, kind of like a point and click adventure game, kind of also like a light gun game all at the same time. It is a very interesting mashup of genres, and it has a very distinct visual vibe with this kind of cyberpunk aesthetic, and it's so much fun to see this working on the CDI core, because again, if you don't have a CDI, and I do not as well, they can be very temperamental systems to deal with and keep alive, and they are quite expensive as well. So something like this, having FPGA recreation of the Philips CDI hardware, is going to keep this system alive for a lot more people for a lot longer, and it's going to allow more people to actually experience CDI in the first place, which is 100% the other focus of something like MiSTer FPGA, keeping these games preserved and playable by everyone on quote-unquote real hardware into the future. And there is something about Burn Cycle, the overall vibe here, how it mixes full motion video with certain kind of digitized sprites that just works. It's such a weird game, and it's such an iconic game of its time. This is what games looked like if they weren't based on sprites back in the day, and it is one of those things. I've always appreciated the look of Burn Cycle, and so many of you guys have been asking me to test this on every single core. Now that I'm redoing an update video, we are here, and again, I do love how the video looks in here. Obviously, it's not using that DVC add-on, but it still does allow for all of this full motion video, and it definitely looks really good. And if you've never played Burn Cycle before, definitely check it out. It is an absolute vibe. I'm not saying it's a complete hidden gem, but it is one of the better games on CDI, and I would classify it as a good game as well. If you did play it back in the day, do leave me a comment down below and tell me what you think of it, because I would be curious. I didn't play this game back in the 90s, I came to it later in life, and I definitely still am enamored by what it is trying to do. But the best part here on the core, it is functioning much better than I think the last time we took a look at it, or maybe we haven't actually taken a look yet. I do lose track of some of the tests because I do so many MiSTer videos, but from all of the blending of the full motion video to the actual control and player input, everything here just seems to be doing a close approximation of what a real CDI would do. But again, I want you to remember that the core is still in active development, so it might be the type of thing, maybe you can finish this game, maybe you can't. I haven't talked to anyone who has it at this point, but just go in expecting to test it, have a good time, but don't expect it to be perfect, and you won't be disappointed. But it is a really fun mix of the full motion video and those pre-rendered backgrounds, and I would say that the acting in this is relatively decent for the era. And trust me, if you didn't grow up in the 90s when they had full motion video, acting was definitely not something that was very good usually. And you'll see here now is the instance in which we have that pseudo light gun gameplay as well. You have different opponents popping up into the screen, they are full motion video, and you kind of have to navigate around the level. So it's not like a complete on-rails shooter where it's kind of dictating every single path you take. You do have the ability to kind of freely traverse the world and then engage in combat from there. And for the most part, there's nothing about this that doesn't look like it would on a CDI, but it is not a console I'm ultimately familiar with, so if you notice anything you don't like, if you are a huge CDI fan, do leave me a comment down below and tell me what you think of the overall look and performance. Every once in a while, there is a line of pixels that'll pop up that does seem like a little bit of a glitch in the code, but again, once this thing gets more iterations, I'm sure a lot of that will be fixed up. Just like the Nintendo 64, PlayStation 1 core, and Sega Saturn core, it's pretty much always going to be buggy and glitchy until that last final release that buttons everything up. And I will say that Burn Cycle has some great music, and the sound quality on the core is getting much better than the last time we took a listen, so go ahead, give it 45 seconds, I'll come back and show you more games that have improved.
Cutter, I'm losing you. Are you still there? You've got to get to the roof. Oh, this is bad, real bad. Talk to me, goddamn you. Where are you?
Music sounds good, voice acting sounds good, and it also isn't the worst voice acting ever, and that's always a bonus. Now moving over to another game that the CDI is synonymous for having, and also one that's gotten some patch notes on Slamy's latest update, is it going to be Hotel Mario. Now of course the cutscenes are terrible and the voice acting is very strange and it gets made fun of a lot, but I would say Hotel Mario is definitely one of the must-plays on the system. Sure, it's not going to live up to any of the Mario games on the Super Nintendo of the era, but it does have a fun gameplay loop and it does give you just enough to enjoy it. And if you just take a look at the footage here, if I gave you a screenshot, you'd be hard pressed to think this was incomplete FPGA recreation of the CDI and not just CDI footage, and that definitely is promising because the CDI does have a decent library and enough titles. Getting something like this running this well this early in development is very impressive, and it is one of those things. Again, it's nothing like Super Mario World. This isn't going to be anywhere near the quality of something that Nintendo developed in that era, but it does have a lot of fun and a lot of charm. And last time we took a look at this game, it had the tendency to freeze or otherwise have graphical glitches. Now I did talk to one person that's basically almost finished the entire game, and they said they really didn't have any issues with it whatsoever. Their controls are responsive, all of the different levels look correct, and they didn't really freeze the game ever on the core, so that's definitely a marked improvement since the last time we talked about it. But the overall freezing issue is pretty much something that every single core goes through during development. The Sega Saturn core would freeze basically every 30 seconds when it was first getting developed. The Nintendo 64 core would crash. It is just how these things get made, so definitely at this point in time, if you're able to finish a game like Hotel Mario, consider yourself lucky because it is still an incomplete CDI, but it is always impressive to see just how much or little of the actual hardware a particular game needs to function. And I would say Hotel Mario also has a very fun soundtrack that sounds relatively good coming out of the core as well, so go ahead and listen, and I'll be right back. I mean, it's definitely not going to stand up to any of the music Nintendo made for Super Mario World or Yoshi's Island, but it does work effectively and it does sound good coming out of the core, and that's always a fun thing. Now moving over to the third and last game in this testing video, we're going to be taking a look at Flashback. That's because it is another game that works on the core, but also because it's pretty hilarious just how many places Flashback got ported to back in the day. If you were a console in the 90s, they were going to put Flashback on you, or at least out of this world, which is a good thing because it is a ton of fun and it is a quality game, although I'm not the most knowledgeable about it, so if you know which version of Flashback would be the de facto best version to play, do leave me a comment down below. It is fun on CDI, but this is one of the games where there can be a slight control issue. Sometimes up doesn't want to work or doesn't want to be as responsive as it should, and again, that's just part of the overall development process. Sometimes controls can be a little bit touchy or a little bit weird, like currently on the Sega Saturn core, we have the STV or Sega Titan video implementation, but controls on some games just do not work as well as others, and this will again all get buttoned up as the core continues development. And of course we have a ton of other ways to play Flashback on MiSTer FPGA, but it's less about the game and more about the performance, and I'd say at least in the visual department here, this just looks like Flashback. From the FMV cut sequences to the overall gameplay and color profile, it just looks like the game that I know, love, and remember, and that makes me happy to see how far this core has come. And again, without that DVC cartridge, there are going to be some games that still continue to not run whatsoever, but I'm sure towards the end of development, Slamy, if he can get that thing into MiSTer FPGA, 100% will. And again, it's so much fun to see something like CDI coming to MiSTer FPGA. Between this and the Atari Jaguar, those also ran consoles of the 90s, do deserve some love, and it's one of those things, if you want to get the close to real hardware as possible experience without spending a fortune, something like MiSTer FPGA cores are going to get you there. And I was very surprised to even see CDI starting development. A lot of people asked for it, but Slamy's been doing an awesome job making this dream for everyone who wanted it. And that is the great thing about MiSTer FPGA. Not every single thing is N64, Sega Saturn, PlayStation based, because there's so much hardware out there that just didn't have as much love back in the day, and I get a ton of questions about it, especially on the MiSTer FPGA front, and CDI was one of those cores that people talked about potentially happening for a long time. You'll see here, sometimes you have to go back in and rebind those inputs because they can be a little bit tricky, but CDI is definitely shaping up quite well. You can play Burn Cycle today if you want to give it a shot, but leave me a comment down below and tell me what your favorite CDI game is. But I'm done, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.